Hey everyone, this is Britton again. Thanks for tuning back in. I'm going to take a cough drop real quick. I'm still suffering from the coronavirus. We have verified it's the coronavirus, like 90% sure. I go do jujitsu, which is grappling, wrestling, and my kids do it, and we just found out that some of the guys at the gym had coronavirus, so we're like 90% sure that's what it is. So I'm still recovering. I feel okay for the most part. I just have a cough and I've been a little sleepy, but anyway, so that's why I have the cough drop. I hope I'm not slurring my speech as I'm talking, but it's important that I'm here. We want to keep the momentum going. A lot of you guys are signing up for the site, which is great. A lot of you guys are reading the book, and we just want to keep that momentum going, so I hate to take time off. So just excuse the cough drop. For those of you who are new to the group, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you get stuff out of it. Hopefully you can go back and watch those other videos. I've covered a bunch of important things, and then of course, I've written the author of 2 books, The Art of Raising Children for Great in the Art of Raising Children for Greatness series. Revealing School was the first one. This is the one that's feels a little bit better. It's education. They're both excellent books, and we have 3 more books coming out in that series. 2 of them will be released later this year. So I wanted to talk today about grade levels. We're getting a lot of questions about what do you do, how do you raise children for greatness for older kids, because we focus primarily on preschool and elementary up to this point. A lot of people are asking if we're going to go past 6th grade. So I just wanted to address that. The short answer is yes, we want to go past 6th grade. We want to go up. I hate to say high school, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but yes, we do want to keep going to the higher grade levels. But we have a different vision for it than most people. I don't know if you fully understand that vision until you read the next 2 books. Really, actually, not the next book on character, but the one after that. Sharon, hey, I'm answering your question today on the higher grade levels. So I am getting to that. I'm glad to see you here, Sharon. So here's our vision for the future. Originally, we never wanted grade levels. We always wanted it to just be levels. Like if you went to jujitsu or karate or something, you get a belt system based on your competence. And it's not necessarily your age, and it's not necessarily a perfect learning track. Like, okay, you're this grade, so you learn this and this and this at this time. Some kids are going to excel. Like we have Jonathan and Colton, my 2 boys, are so good at math. They're already at like 6th grade level math. And Jonathan's in kindergarten. So they've just excelled in math, but they're not necessarily excelling in let's say, reading. They might be on a 2nd or 3rd grade level, but not like they are in math. So we really think that always there should be an organic learning flow, that you should be able to bounce between grades. And if you have a kid that just loves math right now and is excelling, he should just be able to blow past it. We don't want to hold him back to try to keep everything even. So we always hated the idea of grade levels. And when somebody starts Blue Manor Academy, we don't want them to think, okay, well, my kid's in 6th grade, so let's start 6th grade. Really, there's probably history. There's probably things he hasn't learned from the previous grades. So we want you to think of it that way. This is a whole package. This is what we want your kids to learn. Some of it's so advanced that a normal 6th grader, if they're just coming over, may not be ready for that 6th grade material yet. They may need to go back to those other grades. And we hate to think of it as grades because then they feel like, oh, well, I'm going back, or I have to go back to 1st grade history lessons. And that's not the mindset that we want. You're not going back. You're just... It's a belt system. You're getting that competency. There's history that you didn't get. So I hate for people to get so caught up on the grade levels. And the other thing is if you have a kid who's 6th or 7th, 8th grade, I guarantee you there's tons of stuff on our site that they haven't learned that's very valuable. So if your kids only used our site, they might need to know a little bit more in the area of math or whatever, especially if they're going to go to college. But there's so much stuff there that I'd say that, especially when we get everything loaded, your kid's going to be at a middle school level at least. In history and geography and stuff, they're going to be at a high school or maybe a college level. They're going to know way more. So don't get too caught up on that. I would still recommend, if you have a 6th or 7th grader, I'd still recommend you just start at the beginning. They may not need the phonics reading and stuff, but get through the history. We do a layer system. It all builds on itself. There are things that I've learned going back and especially some of those histories books and stuff. I listened to them again. I learned tons. So I really don't want kids or parents to think of it as just a grade level system. It's just what your kids need to know. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing, are we going to be adding more grade levels or more content? Yes. Originally, we had kind of envisioned this as 3 parts. It'll be preschool and kindergarten. That's where we started. That's kind of where we got famous for our phonics system. And we have an early reader. It's crazy. Some of these books I write, especially this one, it took me a long time, like 6 months to a year. The other books are taking even longer because we're editing them more and doing a lot more research, and the quality of writing I think is just phenomenal in this one and going forward. Revealing School is phenomenal. It's very organic. I just wrote it. People love it, but it's not as polished as these ones. But we had always seen our grade levels being three parts. You're going to have preschool, kindergarten. That's where we got our start. Oh, and by the way, when I talked about how long I wrote these, I'm rambling. I already lost my train of thought. It's funny because there was this early reader I did. It took me like a week to write the whole thing. And it's my bestseller. And it's so hard because I put so much time and energy into these books, like a year of work. And then I do a book in a week and it blows up. And it's the easiest, the early reader. But that's where we kind of got famous. Preschool, kindergarten. We want to give kids a firm foundation before they went to school or if they're homeschooling. Now we've moved into elementary. Elementary, we don't see it as that grade period. We see it as you get through it. Maybe you go to 12, 13, 14 before you complete up to 6th grade. Don't worry if that's where you're at because your kid's still advanced. They're going to know stuff that college kids don't necessarily know. We have Latin coming. I talk about how important Latin is in Revealing School. It's hard to tell you why, but they over time they've switched Latin for vocabulary and spelling lists. This extends the learning process infinitely because kids don't know how to decode words. So they literally have to memorize the spelling of every single individual word and the definition. But if you learn the Latin and Greek, the suffix and prefixes and roots, if you just learn that, kids can spell most words. They can dissect most words and get a really good idea of what that word is without having to memorize every individual word. So that is coming. We are going to make our math curriculum a little bit more robust. We're going to do some real world problems. That's going to be great. So that's coming. And then once you get through elementary, instead of doing 7th, 8th, 9th grade, we're going to go into our mastery level stuff. And just to give you an idea, the Latin, the grammar, the spelling for language, that's going to be in the elementary levels. And then in the mastery level, we're going to have a book on language arts. It is going to be, there are some sentences, you don't need to read the whole book. It's funny, they have like the top 100 sentences of all time. There's one from 100 Years. I was just reading the book. It's a horrible book, by the way. I don't recommend it. It's supposedly a classic. 100 Years in Solitude or, oh gosh. I think it's Solitude. Oh my goodness. Look it up, somebody, and post it. It's famous. 100 Years in Solitude, I think. Oh, that's horrible. But anyway, the first sentence is so good. I had no interest in reading the book, but it's so good. It's probably one of the greatest sentences ever written. It's the greatest catchline. I read it to my daughter. She's like, oh, it's amazing. And I'm like, don't ever read the book because it's a really horrific book. And there's some gross parts in it. And it's a classic because it's a leftist enlightenment kind of doctrine. That's why it's a classic. But anyway, the point is that sentence is beautiful. Every kid needs to know it. That's going to be in the mastery. We're going to introduce you to the best writing, the best sentences. We're going to show kids how to craft amazing, powerful sentences and language and how just all of that stuff. That's the mastery level. Some kids don't get that in college. So your kid will be going through that book. And if they get through that book, that will be their middle school and their high school language arts curriculum. It'll be that good. And we don't expect you to do it over 8 years or even 4 years. It's just when you complete it, you're done. The kid is done. We recommend you go back and reread it. Too much of public education is these blocks. You go through them, you test, you move on, you learn nothing, you retain nothing. You should be taking that same curriculum, the same book we're going to give to you. It's going to be phenomenal. And you're going to read it like 100 times. Your kid's going to memorize those sentences, those great, powerful sentences. A lot of times when I'm writing these books, people have said that they're just kind of like poetically written. A lot of times I'm reading those sentences. I'm reading the great poems like Lady of Shalott. It's the greatest poem ever written. Just so beautiful. I read that and it kind of just inspires my writing later. Your kids need to know that. They need to memorize it. It'll make them better speakers, communicators. So that is going to be the mastery level. It might take them 1 or 2 years to get through that curriculum. And then they're done. They'll know more than everybody else. We don't want to hold ourselves up to the public school timetable. Once you read Revealing School, you will understand where they developed that timetable from. It's not because your kids need 13 years of education. And that's why, for the most part, you can't test out of it when you're in sixth grade and be done, even if you passed everything. It's really a daycare system that they developed during the Industrial Revolution. They said, look, we want to get moms into the workplace. We could increase the country's GDP hopefully by double if we could get all the women into the workplace. But most moms back then were having a lot of kids, and especially lower income families, they couldn't afford childcare. So they said, okay, we'll have this socialized system. We'll make all the kids go to this system. That'll free low income moms to go out and work, and they'll pay for their child care kind of subsidized through tax dollars. The point is that timetable was given so that they could get kids to adulthood. It wasn't about education. So there's no reason that your kids will need all of middle school and then all of high school. Our goal is to help your kids develop mastery and be done by, let's say, 14, maybe 15. Hopefully earlier. We see kids as becoming adults at 13 years old. Again, I talk about that in Revealing School. Traditionally, that was the standard. Based on the theory of evolution, they kind of came up with this idea of adolescence. But our goal is to get your kids fully educated, everything that they need to know by sixth grade. We don't think that that's cramming or very hard to do. We think public schools are so much unnecessary stuff that we can cut to the basics and actually teach more by just removing all the non-essential things that public schools are teaching. And then our goal is around 13, 14, your kid starts to develop a career path, and that is not going to be a standard curriculum. That's going to be what your kid's passionate about. I don't care, like my daughter's an artist, so she's about to turn 13. She knows more history, math. I'm not exactly sure where she is, but she knows more than she needs to know. She's very advanced. And now it's time, she'll keep working on the history and math and stuff like that as she goes on. And you should study history your whole life. But now she's going to start mastering a skill. And for her, she wants to be an artist and an author, just like her dad. And that's hard. It's so competitive. So she has to be the best. So we're going to start early. And she's going to start really honing in on that career path. And that's our vision for older kids. Like once you get past elementary and then the master classes, which should take a year or two, now you have the rest of your middle school, high school years to focus on a career. It's going to be a little bit different depending on your state. Your state may have requirements. The standards are so low in the public school system, I think you're okay even if you ignore them and just take the test. If your kids want to go to college, they may need certain curriculum or credit hours. That's different. But our focus is going to be on mastery. And once your kids are 13, 14, we want them focusing on a career. That is how you become successful. You don't get paid for how well, what your grades were in science or math or for reading. Everybody can read. Even if you read really well, you're not going to get a career that way. So our focus is faith, family, finances, and fitness. Your kids need a career path. They need something that they can master if they were going to have a successful career. And obviously, the earlier they start, the quicker that they'll achieve mastery. If your kid wants to be a builder, imagine if at 13 years old he started studying architecture. He actually started going and working on I don't know if he could work on job sites, but he could be mentored by somebody and start framing buildings. And he doesn't have to get paid anything. He's just learning. Well, by the time he's 18, he's going to be not a master, but he's definitely going to have the skills to start working professionally, and he'll become a master very, very quickly because he started earlier. Where other kids are starting their careers now at like 20s, or some of them even into their 30s now, early 30s, before they really develop a career path. We want to get our kids ahead. That's how you raise kids for greatness. You start training them like the Olympics. You don't start at 14, 15. These kids start at 3 years old, and they start ice skating a lot, and they develop the skills, and then nobody can compete with them. So if you want to be an artist, your kid does, they need to start at 3, 4, 5 years old and start learning the principles of the master. Because for the most part, it's not about your age. There's a certain amount of information you need to learn. They say master usually takes about 10 years. So if you start at 3, and kids at 3 can start learning. I have I'd say a 5-year-old, 6 years old, my son Colton. His level of chess, he was beating me. He just beat me recently. So they can master things at a very early age. We don't give them credit. But if they started at 3, 4, 5 years old, 10 years, 15, they could be a master. At least that entry-level mastery level. That's what we want for kids. So when they enter the adulthood, get married, they're not at the bottom of the totem pole. They don't have to take on tons of debt. They don't have to go to college if they don't want to. They have the skills that they need. They may have to go get the certificate, but they have the skills they need. If your kid wants to be an architect, that could be really stressful going to architect school and trying to cram all that in. Imagine if they started when they were 5 years old. I don't know what you have to learn to be an architect, but You're going to have to learn some geometry, and you're going to have to learn, I don't know, you start studying buildings and arches and all the famous works. I don't know. But imagine if you started that at 5 years old. I'm going to answer a real quick question here from Sharon. So my daughter, who is in 6th grade, should start at the beginning of Blue Manor Academy. I started my little guy. Okay. Yeah, kind of. I would use common sense, Sharon. That is my recommendation. That's why I hate having the grades levels, because your daughter who's in 6th grade is going to be like, I'm not going back to kindergarten. I wouldn't see it that way. It was always supposed to be just levels. Obviously, she probably doesn't need to do the phonics. You could even have her, if you want to, just for fun, say, hey, will you teach your little guy, I assume that's a boy, your little brother, his phonics lessons. And then she could go through it. She probably doesn't need phonics. I'm assuming she has that down. I would probably go through the history book. It's a very easy book. It should take her 5 to 10 minutes. Maybe do it a few times, memorize it, and then build on and just use common sense. But yeah, if she's in 6th grade, we've already done some deep history stuff. There's going to be some of the classics that you should read. I think she's going to miss out on, like the Velveteen Rabbit. That's an earlier, 1st, 2nd grade level book. I just read that about a year ago. It's a phenomenal book. As an adult, I was like, wow, that's phenomenal. So she should read that, and I don't think of it as, that's a 2nd grade book. There's no such thing as 2nd grade. That's just a level. All of this stuff is essential, and I wouldn't focus on the grade level too much. And then if she runs out of stuff on Blue Manor and she's mastered it, which I know she can't, because I don't know some of that stuff. My kids know more than me about some of it, and I wrote the curriculum now. There's so much to learn there already. If she's mastered that, then I'd start saying, okay, we'll start turning to some of the classics. Also, go to the library. I'm putting a ton of extra stuff because the grade levels were so heavy in content in the beginning. I was like, man, we can't have all of this. We'll put it into the library. She could go in and start reading books in that library. And then I'd really start thinking about a career path. I hate to get into it now because I focus on that a little bit more. I'm a huge fan of being gender specific too. So if you have a daughter, say, okay, what are your passions? And then for like my daughters, I want them, at least them, to have the privilege of staying home. I stay home. I love it. I wish every guy could too, but somebody has to sometimes work out of the home. So I think, okay, with my daughters, what's a good career path that they could do for home? And actually, girls have a lot more freedom in careers because they can pursue art. And they may not have to make an income right away where it's really hard in art. They can pursue writing. But I want them to be able to do it from home. So we kind of custom tailor that. But yeah, I'd start thinking of like a career path. What is she passionate about? And it doesn't have to be limited to that. If she wants to be a doctor or something, start memorizing anatomy. Start becoming a master in that stuff. Start learning about health or whatever you have to do. I don't know what the career path is, but I would start focusing on that. I wouldn't get too focused on the core curriculum that we have. Even you can use outside of stuff. We have a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to add, and I'm rambling now, but we have a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to add for your kids that's going to be phenomenal, and it's going to help them get to those higher level stuff. But right now, our 100-meter target is the Raising Children for Greatness series, and that is because, Sharon, you are like the first line of defense. You are the 100-meter target. I know I'm trying to finish these books as quickly as possible because I know that even if you didn't have Blue Manor Academy, you as a parent, like once you know how to do this, you can do it without any curriculum. You'll find it. You'll make it. You'll know what to do. So once you read these other books that are coming very shortly, you'll have a better idea how to do that. She wants to be a dentist. Okay, so does she know all the teeth? I'd start, if that's what she wants to do. That's a tough career, but she could do that from home. I don't know a lot about dentistry, but she could start, I'm sure she could start learning about the medicines or the dentistry and, public speaking. If she's going to be a dentist, she's going to have to know marketing. I know most of those dentists, they focus on the teeth, which is important. But then I know a ton of dentists personally, not a ton, but a few. And they had a really tough time when they got started because they have to market, they have to manage their staffs, they need leadership skills, they need to know how to manage money and how to run a business and payroll. So actually, she's going to need to know a ton of stuff, and it's not just about the teeth. So memorize the teeth for sure, but then that's where we're going to get in the mastery level stuff. That's in the 4th book. I'm going to talk about that huge, but mastering the art of wealth, mastering the art of public speaking, of leadership, those sort of things. Everybody's going to need to know that, and she's going to definitely need to know that if she wants to be a dentist. She's going to need to know about location, where to set up her shop, to think about competition. Is there 15 other dentist shops? That could be a good or a bad thing. If there's that many shops, it might be because there's tons of business. If she's the best, she can pull tons of business. She'll be good. But it also might mean that there's so much competition that she can't compete. That's all stuff that's relevant to being a dentist. How's she going to be a dentist? She could actually do that out of her home probably. Set up a clinic. Does she want to do that? How's she going to manage her family? Those are all skills that she should be preparing for now before she gets stuck at 24. She just got married. She's starting to have kids and she's trying to make it all work. I would have her start thinking through those things ahead of time. There are generic things that raising children for greatness requires that are core curriculum, and one is leadership. So that'll apply to dentistry, public speaking, wealth management, manners and etiquette. All of that stuff will tie in, and we're going to add some more of that stuff at Blue Manor. But those are things she could start mastering outside of our academy that you could kind of create for her. So I hope that, just Sharon, does that kind of answer the question? The question, the answer is yes, we have more coming for her for higher levels. It'll be there soon, but there's probably enough there for her to get started. And then more is coming. We are working on the curriculum right now. We're writing our Latin curriculum. We're going to add that soon. I've already started the mastery book for language arts. We're going to be adding some more math. So there is more content coming, but there's more than enough there to get her started. I promise you. I promise if me and you sat down and went through some of that curriculum in 4th, 5th grade, we could not get through the history and some of the science and stuff as adults. So there's enough for her. The other thing I just want to mention that's coming to Blue Manor, and we're making it as quick as we can afford it and as quick as the limited staff we have can produce it. But we're going to have more games. I know there's 3 games that are kind of memory games. I think they're actually really valuable for kids to kind of exercise, warm up their brain. There's only 3. We want more. It's coming. We're going to have just a huge, the vision is 1,000 games for academic fun games for kids to learn. Another one is a gallery. We think it's really important to have a gallery. We want kids to be able to write stories for us, for themselves, but they can share it on there for their peers to read. If they want to be an artist or if they write a really good report, they can share it, and hopefully eventually people can like it and kind of interact with that. It'll be a gallery. They can share their poetry or whatever they want. So that's coming. News is super important. I think we always focus on the subjects in school, but current events is not important enough. Kids need to be studying the news. And the problem is you can't let your kids read news anywhere because there are things, you know what I'm talking about. It's some girl, I don't know, she wore a really scandalous bikini, and that's headline news right along with oil prices and other things. There's sex things that our kids cannot read in the news. It's just so inappropriate. The news has become not news. It's kind of headlines. It's centralized because they need you to just read it, and they're trying to hook you into it. So obviously we don't want our kids reading that, but kids need to know the news. So we want to eventually at Blue Manor create a news site that's appropriate, that's Christian. I want my kids to know oil prices and gold prices daily. Check that. I want them to understand how the Dow Jones works and be checking that daily. They need to know that there's a coronavirus going on in the news and be listening to the presidential updates and stuff like that. There are no sites like that for kids. Usually news for kids are really kind of corny. They're silly. We want it to be important, essential news without all the filth that gets mixed in. I was even at this conservative site, and on the sidebar they had ads that were just really bad, really inappropriate. Half-naked girls and stuff on the site. And it's a conservative site. So, yeah, we think news, current events is as important, if not more important than history. They should be right neck and neck. So we want to add that. We do want to add a networking site for kids so kids can start networking. If we have a bunch of artists, we'd love them to be able to collaborate and share. My daughter's collaborating with 4 or 5 other girls right now. It's a rough collaboration because some of them are not homeschooled. They don't have all day to do it. Some have lost interest. But they were writing this amazing story about all these girls going into the jungle. And they were writing it from different perspectives. Audrey wrote her character and everybody wrote theirs, and they were going to combine it in this book. And that was so cool. They could collaborate on that. Even if it fails, networking and working together like that and producing a product is powerful. So we want that on the site someday. We could team up authors and artists, or just so people have their peers that they're going through the same thing with and kind of focusing on the same career as motivation. The master talks right now, I'm almost embarrassed. I got started with those. I envisioned this amazing studio for master talks, and it's just me, and I'm just talking, and I'm kind of drawing as I talk, and I'm a great artist. I'm not saying that to brag, but I think if you saw Dino Hunt, it's really good, I think. I'm a proud artist, but my artwork's horrific because I'm drawing and scribbling, and it's really embarrassing. But actually, there's good content there, and we're gonna beef that up. I think that's actually the heart of this. I want to teach your kids history. I know tons of history. I want to be able to teach in a way that's exciting and dynamic to kids, and talk about leadership and character development, and just share those things. So the master talks are gonna be essential. And there's not a ton there right now. I know you're like, is this even really a feature yet? It's going to be phenomenal. I'm going to try to add Master Talks, at least 1 or 2 videos a week. I'd look into Master Talks. For example, if you don't know what the Glorious Revolution is, that is probably the most essential event in history in the last, let's say, since the coming of Christ. It definitely in modern times, and nobody knows it. It's more important than the American Revolution. It is when, well, you should just watch the class. I mean, it's a huge cultural shift. It was when the monarchies began to fall, and this kind of new world order, this liberty movement kind of swept the world. And kids don't even know about it. They think the American Revolution happened in a bubble because people didn't want to pay a tax. It's not true. They're all linked. The French Revolution, many of the same actors in the French Revolution fought in the American Revolution, then went over and fought the French Revolution. And it's all the same characters. It's an international order that funded these. So it's essential history, and people don't even know it. I say Glorious Revolution. Kids don't even know American Revolution, but you say Glorious Revolution, they have no idea what it is. So that's essential history that kids have to know. It's so important, and that's on there. Master Talks, it's me just talking. It's a video. Like I said, it's not high production value, but it's essential learning. And kids will get it. I talk my kids' ears off all the time. So Master Talks is going to be beefed up. And then the library, we're going to continue to add classics. It's really hard because some of the classics that we have to be careful putting some classics there. There's inappropriate materials, so we have to read these and sometimes edit them or just throw them out. So we're going to continue to add classic books there. And I shouldn't just say classics. We're going to continue to add great books to the library. Now, there are some classics that are a little rough, like Huckleberry Finn. I'll get into that some other time. That book is on the site. There are some controversial scenes in there. Not like inappropriate, but some of the language is a little bit risky or kind of racist. The guy was not racist. He was an abolitionist. I think he was trying to prove how absurd some of these people's mindsets were. But it could definitely be a sensitive book. The cool thing, too, is there's a feature. It's jacked up right now. We're fixing the coding. It'll be updated on Thursday or next Thursday. But you'll be able as a parent to go in there and hide books if you don't want your kids to read it. We think that's totally appropriate. You're the parent. You have the power. You know your kid. You know your values, what you want them to learn. So you'll have that. That is a feature there now. But the library is going to be huge. Everything we put in that library we think is essential. But it's not extra. But it's like once your kids get done with the normal stuff, go to the library, pick some books out, read them. That's all going to be quality stuff that we recommend your kids read. So you'll have that. So anyway, that gives you some idea of what's coming. We have this grand plan. It takes longer to implement sometimes than we'd like, but it's coming, and we want everything to be quality. Right now, you are the front line. As the parent, you are it. If Blue Manor Academy blew up tomorrow, you would be okay once you know the fundamentals of raising kids for greatness. This book is so important. I know it's rougher. It's not as nice it's not as uplifting, but it's painful. But it's really a necessary book. It'll show you what not to do and why. There's so many people who think they're unschoolers and they have no idea. There's so much stuff that's been ingrained in you and you're just repeating it. This book is great. Characters coming. The next one's going to be The Noble Way, and that's going to talk about how to manage families for greatness, how to build wealth for greatness, public speaking, leadership, understanding leadership. You take a class in college on leadership and you'll be a worse leader. I promise you. It'll be this book big, and they'll talk about these different dynamics and just all these bubble sheets and stuff. Horrible leadership. When you talk about leadership, you should be talking about Caesar crossing the Rubicon. That is a moment in history where you can't teach that in a textbook. I mean, that takes something, charisma. That we're going to be having books for kids like that on leadership to teach that. That is going to be coming. That's important. At this point, I'm just rambling. But I guess my point is that don't get too caught up on the curriculum. The curriculums are to aid you. We appreciate it. We're taking your funds that you're giving to us. We're putting it right back in, plus a ton of our own money. So we don't make anything at this point. Someday, hopefully, we will. But we are passionate about this. We're going to give you a great quality. We're using that to add more stuff. More stuff is coming for your grade levels. But as of right now, we're just going to go to 6th grade. We want to complete it, get it perfect, get everything in there that we want. Then we're going to do the mastery level stuff. That'll be more for middle school. And we're going to start adding the news and stuff like that as soon as we can afford it. In short, there you go. Okay, guys, if you guys have questions, please leave them. Friday, my goal is to answer the questions you asked today about this topic. Last week, we didn't get a ton of them, even though the previous weeks we had tons of them. And then last week, I announced that we'd be doing that. We had no questions, so I had to take a different question and kind of wing it. But if you have more questions about what the vision is going forward, please ask. For older kids, just know the answer is coming this summer. The character one is going to give you tons of insights, and then the next book is going to give you tons of insights on what you need to do. If you can't think of anything, focus on, wealth creation is important. Public speaking is a superpower for people. If you can teach your kids public speaking, there's no end. You can go into sales or whatever, become a powerful speaker. That is a superpower that applies to dentistry or everything. And I like doing that more general because I'm imagining, she might want to be a dentist now. That might change in a few years. That happened to my daughter. But if you give them the fundamental skills of leadership and business and things like that apply to every career, that'll make you great in every career, that's super essential. And then, of course, if she wants to be a dentist, start learning the teeth. While you got the passion, start teaching that anatomy of the mouth and the head and sinuses. I'm sure all of that is relevant. And then when that wears off, if she wants to do something different, that's great. She still knows all that cool stuff. And you can start, working on the next career path. So thank you so much, Sharon. I hope that answered your question. I will be back on Friday to answer questions, and we'll just keep building this thing. I'm really excited. I've been sick, so I haven't worked on the book, but the book is halfway edited. It's going to be out this summer for sure. It's really good. I think if you liked education, it's twice as thick. I think it's twice as good because the content's just more fun. It's character development versus education, which is it's not as exciting, even though I think people like it. So, all right, guys, leave your questions, and I'll see you Friday. Thanks.